Hello. Hi, I figured it out. Dude, I couldn't figure out my camera for the longest, but I figured it out. It took time, but I got it figured out. I'm literally so glad that I have a tablet too.
I'm a single dad to a wonderful daughter, who's been the light of my life from the very moment she was born. It would be an understatement to say things weren't easy after her mother passed, but we made it through the grief together, and that it strengthened our family bond. My daughter had since grown and flown the nest, and we've always had a great relationship. But when she was growing up, I found myself gripped by fear that I'd end up losing her too. Sometimes that terror of loneliness was
This
just background
style of
noise,
animation
something
is
I managed to
fucking
ignore
weird.
by busying myself. Other times it was overwhelming,
Look at
and
her
I'd become so overly
face.
cautious and protective of her that sometimes I feel like I failed her as a father.
Dude, what the
She
fuck?
missed out on a few field trips, a handful of her friends' birthday parties, and a whole lot of play dates, all because I was just too nervous to leave her alone in a place that I wasn't familiar with.
That's me.
It got to the point where, around the time
Feel
of her
that.
13th birthday, I realized that I'd never left her home alone before.
Oh shit.
Even when it came to short grocery store runs, I'd insist that she'd hit pause on whatever she was doing to join me on whatever errand I was running. That worked when she was younger, but then the older she got, the more she appeared to resent
Look
being
at her
attached to my hip.
face.
The whole thing culminated in a small
She
argument
said,
one
bitch,
day
I am dead
when she was
inside.
insistent on me leaving her at home so she could finish off some homework while she was still feeling studious. My words, not hers, by the way. I won the argument, and she had a face like thunder during the ride to the grocery
Look
store,
at
but
her
I
face,
started to wonder if
bro.
I
What
should
the
be relaxing
fuck?
my policies as she got older. A few months later, after a long period of reflection, I walked into her room and told her that I was making a quick run to Target to pick up a few things.
This story is weird.
She groaned, slumped off her chair, and moved to put her shoes on. Then, with theatrical timing, I told her that I would be going alone.
Alone.
She smiled, the kind of smile that brings a lot of joy as a parent.
That's a
It
joyous
was a smile
smile
that
right
marked a
there.
milestone in both of our lives. She was growing up, and it was time to start giving her some space. I know it might sound pretty dumb, but I actually got a little emotional while climbing into the driver's seat and edging out of
Oh
our
my
driveway.
god.
The whole kids growing up so fast thing is for sure overused, but it's overused because it's true. By the time I got to Target, I'd fought back all the tears, and after repeatedly telling myself everything is going to be fine, I actually began to feel a semblance of calm. Then, as I'm walking up and down the aisles, picking up odds and ends, I feel my phone start to vibrate in my pocket.
It's always
I
something.
pull
Literally, always something technical going on. 1 second. Okay. Is this better? Am I too loud now?
pull it out and see it's my daughter calling me, probably to ask me to pick something up for her. I press the green button, bring the phone to my ear, and before I can even say anything, all I can hear is screaming and crying. I just left the shopping cart where it was, sprinting out of the store and back towards my car.
Is it working
Then
now?
as I was
Is
driving
it
back to the
fine
apartment,
now?
I tried calming her down and getting her to tell me what was happening. She just kept saying, I don't know. I don't know.
What?
I think someone shot a gun. My next question was, are you hurt? And when she
Awesome.
replied, yes,
Thank you.
I just tossed my phone down, got both hands on the wheel, and then started speeding back towards our apartment. Minutes later, I was only 2 blocks from my apartment when I saw flashing lights in the rearview mirror. I felt sick as I realized that I was faced with 2 distinct choices.
Run from
Run
the
from the cops
cops.
to get to my daughter and risk getting myself shot or something when I jumped out of my car to run inside, or pull over, try my best to explain the situation, and temporarily condemn my daughter to her fate. To some, that might seem like a real conundrum,
It is a
but to a parent,
conundrum.
absolutely zero thought is involved in the decision making. You help
But
your child.
yes,
There are
that's
no
true.
other options.
That's true.
I never thought that I'd ever get into an actual
That is true because if my kid had ever called me like that, like I'm in trouble and I'm hurt, like yeah, no, I'm not stopping for the cops. I'll do something. I always thought like what would I have to do in that type of situation? Like if I had like if there was an emergency and I was like on my way to the ER or something and the cops like tried to stop me, like what would I do to kind of like alert them that I'm not fucking stopping for them? I'm like, what do you do in that situation? Do you like call 911 and be like, "Yeah, I'm being chased by the police right now, but I'm not stopping because I have to go to the ER because of so and so and so and so." Like, how does that even work?
police chase in my life. Aside from a few parking tickets, I've always walked the line and stayed firmly on the right side of the law. So the fact that I was gunning it away from a cop car, praying they'd understand my reasoning, it was surreal in the extreme. I raced the 2 blocks back to my apartment, skidded into my
And
driveway,
then
then got out of the
also,
car
I feel like this is a good idea because now the cop has probably chased him all the way home. So now we have help.
with my
It's
hands
not
in
the
the air
best
as
way
the
to get
cops
it,
raced in behind me.
but hey, at least the
I
cops are
remember
here
them
now.
jumping out too, taking cover behind their open
Oh
doors,
my
then pointing
God.
guns or tasers at me as I screamed at them, I'm so sorry.
I'm
My
so
daughter's in
sorry.
trouble. I couldn't stop. I
I'm
can't
so
stop.
sorry.
I kept repeating my story as one of the cops approached with his gun drawn, and I don't know if it was the tone of my voice or the
Look
look in
how
my
he's.
eyes, but all of a sudden, he stops and asks me where my keys are. Recognizing that he was giving me the benefit of the doubt, I told him that my front door keys were attached to my car keys and that they were still in the ignition of my car. He told his partner to keep an eye on me. Then he grabs my keys after shutting off my engine, then
See,
basically runs into my apartment to look for my
see,
daughter.
he's like,
That was a truly terrifying few minutes for me,
he just
because I
ran
had
in
no
there,
idea
you
what the cops were
know?
going to find.
You just tell
I
him
didn't
you're
know
in
if it was an
trouble.
intruder still in the apartment, or if all they were going to find was my daughter's
Let's,
body, and waiting for the answer with a
hope
gun
that
pointed
cops are
at me
that
felt like an
competent.
eternity. When the cop emerged moments later, leading my daughter out of the apartment, it was probably the purest, most overwhelming sense of relief I've ever felt.
Okay, so she's cool. She's
But when I saw
fine.
that she had blood all over her, I begged the
Mm,
cops to call an ambulance to get her to the hospital,
mm.
and the one cop who went inside said that he'd wait with her until the EMTs arrived, but
Oh,
the other guy was going to have to arrest me for fleeing a traffic stop.
oh my God.
The cop was just doing his job. I know that. There's no way that he could have just let me go for starting a car chase, no matter how small it was, but he
So,
gave me dignity of just sitting.
so shit. He got arrested. Like, so what? Do you stop? Like, do you not stop? Like,
Me in the back seat
what?
of the squad car while it was parked across the street.
I'm
Me getting arrested like
confused.
that obviously made the situation even more distressing for my daughter, who had
Yeah.
no idea why I was being held in the back of that squad car. But after she calmed down a little,
This whole
one of the
story
cops
went
checked her
left.
injuries, then came over to tell me that she'd be okay, and that all her injuries were basically superficial. I asked him if it was 100% sure because my daughter had mentioned something about a gunshot when she called me. but the cop was able to assure me that she had no gunshot wounds, just a bunch of glass cuts to her upper arm and lower cheek. Again, I felt this overwhelming sense of relief, and for the second time that day, I found myself fighting back tears. A few minutes later, the EMT showed up. Then, after a quick examination of my daughter's injuries, she was driven to the hospital to get stitches.
Okay.
That was my cue to be taken to jail, but I was out on bail just a few hours later
sister.
after being given a court summons for fleeing the traffic stop.
I
I immediately drove over to the hospital to pick up my daughter, who by then had a
We're
line of
watching
stitches
fucked
along
up,
the worst of her
scary
wounds, which
stories.
ran along her jawline. On the way back to our apartment, I got her to tell me exactly what had happened to cause her
What
injuries,
happened?
as obviously I still didn't
Tell
understand how a
us.
gunshot had caused glass injuries. She said that she was making a sandwich and getting a glass of water and
She
had
was
just placed the
making a
glass of water down in front of
sandwich.
her on our little breakfast nook when it suddenly exploded. The explosion of glass was what caused the cuts on her arm and face, and
What?
right around the same time, she said that she had heard a loud bang coming from the apartment next door.
What?
Now, without boring you with too much detail, the layout of our kitchen is such that there's no way someone could have actually aimed a shot at her. But when I got back home and spoke to the cops who were still there, all became clear. They had already arrested our neighbor in the apartment next door, as the angle of the bullet holes in our kitchen showed exactly where the shot had come from.
Oh, so it was a shot.
Apparently, the guy was drunk, or at least some other kind of intoxicated,
Wow.
and had decided to clean his guns without checking if they were actually loaded or not.
Wow.
He admitted to the whole thing, and apparently broke
Could you
down crying in the cop
imagine?
car, thinking he'd seriously hurt someone after hearing all the screaming.
Could you imagine?
He caught a reckless endangerment charge, which he was eventually convicted of, but he didn't see any jail time for it. He only has his guns confiscated
Well, thank
after
you.
receiving
They
a suspended
changed color.
sentence and mandatory substance counseling, and call me biased, but I think that he should have been handed a whole lot more.
Well, damn.
Me, on the
Yeah,
other
you almost
hand,
killed the
I
girl.
pled no contest to the traffic stop thing.
Oh, yeah.
But after the judge learned of the circumstances and how they were related to the other guy's reckless endangerment charge, I only had to pay $500 mandatory fine instead of having
Only
my license suspended
$500.
for a year on top of that.
That's all.
According to my attorney, it was about as good a deal as I was ever going to get, as obviously no one is above the law, and the cops take fleeing traffic stops very, very seriously. In the end, it was clear to both me and my daughter that we had both dodged a major disaster.
Oh my God. We had both dodged a major disaster. They literally would not bring themselves to say, we both dodged a bullet. I'm done. I'm fucking done. But really, what do you do in that situation? Like, he got arrested for a fucking evading a traffic stop. Like, what? Instead of, like, being able to go and help his daughter, he got fucking arrested and literally had to deal with that shit. Thank God the judge was, like, cool and all of that, because even if you plead no contest, like, most of the time they look at that shit just as, like, pleading guilty. So,
was something that I was very thankful for.
yeah.
But just as I gotten comfortable with giving
that
my
is a
daughter some
conundrum.
space and privacy in her life, the anxiety of losing her
Right.
somehow came back 100 times stronger, and it wreaked havoc on my mental health. For the first time in my life, I actively sought out therapy on my sister's recommendations, and I have to admit that weekly sessions put a serious dent in my paranoia and overprotectiveness. I never turned out to be one of those hands-off, carefree parents. I'm still
Yeah.
not, even now that she's moved out and living in some fancy apartment downtown. I'll always be her father. Not a thing in the world is
I don't
going to
know.
change that, but this also means that until the day that I'm in the dirt, I'll always be scared.
Duh. I mean, that's how it's gonna be any time as a parent. Like, until your last days, you're always gonna be worrying
I'm a
about your
15-year-old
babies.
female, and I live with my parents and my older brother. He's 18.
I'm sorry, but I was shocked. I was a little taken aback by that male voice saying, I'm a 15-year-old female.
Years old. My parents work till late evenings, and most of the times I'm home alone. Sometimes my brother is home
yes,
with
this
me.
is a new story now.
My family used to take care of a mentally disabled person by giving him food, old clothes, and some other things. Sometimes he used to behave perfectly like a normal person.
What?
He was not that ill that I knew of. I knew him since I was 10. He had no family, and he used to live with the people that he was working for, basically cleaning and such. One evening, it was almost 7 p.m., and my brother and I were home alone. My brother was sleeping on the couch, and I heard a knock on the door, and I heard him, let's call him George for the sake of the story, calling my mother. I opened the door, and I let him know that she wasn't home. He had slightly moved in, and as soon as he saw my brother was sleeping there, he stopped and he started whispering and asking me for my phone number.
What?
I was completely shocked. Why would he need my number? And if it was for some genuine reason, why was he whispering as if he didn't want my brother to hear it?
Can I have your number?
I immediately felt uneasy, and I made him leave by telling him to come on a Sunday to meet my mother for whatever reason he came for. He left.
She said, you need to
Fast
go.
forward 2 to 3 months later, and I was again home alone.
You need to go.
My brother was at my uncle's home for my older cousin for the night.
Oh my God.
My
okay.
mom and dad had to go see my grandma at the hospital, and my dad would be staying there, and my mom wouldn't be back until 10 p.m. Now, I was in my bedroom watching some YouTube videos when I again heard knocking at the front door. It was around 8 p.m., and I thought my mom's probably back early. So I went to unlock the door, and when I did, it was him, George.
She's got a stalker.
He was standing there at the door with an evil grin on his face.
Oh,
I was about to shut the door when he said he needed
help.
some water to drink, as he was thirsty. As I've known him since I was a child and never really felt any danger with him except the last time, I told him to wait there, and I went to grab a glass of water for him.
What?
When I came out of the kitchen, I saw he was already inside our living room standing there,
No.
and I was kind of scared and
Oh,
confused.
stop. Why do they
I
have
gave
his
him the
neck and
glass,
stuff like
and
that?
he tried to hold my hand. I was almost
Oh my God.
paralyzed with fear.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Stop. Look. Stop. Remember I was telling you about that guy at my job, at my old job, and whenever he came up to me, he was the janitor and he had gloves on his hands, and oh man, he had gloves on his hands and he was a janitor. I don't know what he was dealing with, but he would always like wipe his hands on me, and he would grab my arm like that, like trying to hold my hand and stuff, following me to the lunch break room and all that.
He
That's
started
exactly
coming
how
closer to me, and he almost tried to touch me
exactly
inappropriately
how it was,
when I
right
just slapped
there.
him.
I never
He even
slapped
told
him,
me that he wanted to have sex with me,
but yeah,
and he would then
no,
immediately leave after that.
no, he wasn't that
I was
verbal either.
disgusted,
But
and I
he
told
would
him
be
I was going to
like,
call the
he'd
police.
be like,
After that, he left,
trying to hold my hand
and I
and
told
stuff.
my mother when she came back home about everything that happened. To my knowledge, she told my father about it, and I don't know what they did to
Obviously,
him
like she's
afterwards,
like sounds like she's a
but I
teenager
never did
too.
see him again. To this day, I still can't believe how my family took him in, and he could behave like that. He truly was a sick that didn't deserve our hospitality.
I thought that she said in the beginning that he lived across the street or some shit with the other family. Right?
My name is Angelo,
Okay, new
and I'm
story.
16. Around 3 months ago, my parents left me alone due to them heading to a wedding.
New story.
I live with my family and
Well,
dogs.
damn. The parents left their child at home and went to a wedding by themselves. Like what? I'm about to bring my baby to some what? Bringing my baby to the wedding.
Coco, Marshall, Sky, and Rubble.
What?
Marshall and Sky are pit
It's just
bulls,
him and the
so I had
dogs.
nothing to fear if someone broke in. A couple of hours after my parents left, I let Marshall and Sky outside to do
Oh,
their
wow.
business.
That's
I heard
fucking
barking
crazy.
outside, and I went to check on them when I saw a woman who was around 5'5" and in her late 30s standing on the other side of the fence looking at my dogs. "You have such beautiful dogs," can I pet them? The woman said to me. I was about 3 feet away from the fence.
No, you
I could
cannot
smell
pet
cigarettes
them.
coming off her clothes.
No,
Sorry,
you cannot
they
pet
don't really
them.
like being pet, but thanks for
They
the compliment.
don't like being pet.
I said to the woman while
Bye.
hurrying my dogs inside. She then gave me this glare. A glare
Look at her
that still
face.
haunts me to
Look
this
at her face. You said, bitch, I can't pet your dog.
day. When my dogs were inside, I made sure the doors were locked, and I checked that the woman was gone. When I didn't see her, I rushed all of my dogs to a room that was the farthest away from the backyard door. I texted my mom that there was a strange woman outside trying to pet our dogs.
There's a strange lady
Now,
trying to pet
I
our
forgot to mention,
dog.
but there's apartments right next to our neighborhood, and we had a fair share of people stopping and looking at our dogs. But something about this woman made me and my dogs feel really unnerved. My mom said that they wouldn't be heading home anytime soon, but to be safe.
Be safe,
A few
but
minutes
we're not
later,
coming.
I had heard the doorbell, and all of the dogs
Oh,
went
hell
crazy. My bedroom is fairly large, but
What kind
all
of
of the
mom is
dogs
that?
moving around was crazy. I decided
What kind
not
of
to
dog
bother
is
to
that?
see who was outside and to just
not
stay
what
with the
kind of dog.
dogs.
What kind of mom is that? She just sat there and said, well, we're not coming home anytime soon, but be safe. Like what?
Me and the dogs were watching a movie, but I then heard clicks in my window. I paused the movie, and I was starting to freak out internally, wondering if it was that same lady trying to break in.
Yep, it is.
And then I heard a loud crash. I mustered up the courage to look out the window. I pulled back the curtains, and what I saw was shocking.
She's really that hurt
I saw
over
that
not being
same
able to
woman
pet the
breaking
dog?
into my neighbor's house.
Oh, it's the neighbors.
I quickly closed the curtains and called 911 on the phone. I stayed quiet as to not alert the woman. The operator said that the police would get there in about 2 minutes, but I then heard a shriek coming from my neighbor's house.
Oh, hell no.
I looked out my window, and I saw my neighbor attacking the woman, who was then screaming at the top of her lungs. I was still on the phone, and I had told the operator that my neighbor was now fighting against the woman. By now, the police got there, and they had to taser the woman for how violent she was.
That's how I would be on the phone.
She was spouting swears that would make a sailor blush,
Hurry.
and she was moving uncontrollably. The police took a knife and what looked to be a gun away from the lady. She started to say that she was going to kill me and my dogs and burn my house down.
Hold up. She's that hurt about not being able to pet the goddamn dogs. She said, I'm gonna kill you and I'm gonna burn your house down because you won't let me pet your dogs. And I just might kidnap them.
I think she was high and thought that my neighbor's house was mine due to how similar the houses looked.
That's
I was stunned, looking out my window, while the thought of what that woman would do to me and my dogs if she got me.
That's fucking scary.
I then started to cry, holding my dogs close to me. I didn't know what to do, so I kind of just sat there until I fell asleep.
Poor kid.
I had heard my parents opening my door, saying they were home. I didn't know what to say, but I then told them to talk to the neighbors next to us.
You're like, yeah, bitch, I ain't got nothing to say to you. You abandoned me. You better talk to the neighbor.
Days went by, and now they insist that I can't stay home alone anymore. I can't get the image of her glare out of my head,
I can't leave you alone anymore.
And I now sleep with both of my pit bulls just to feel safe. I know I'll be safe now, but knowing what that woman was capable of doing just scares me. If that woman didn't break into my neighbor's house and broke into mine instead, I just know me and my dogs would be dead. Stay safe out there.
That's fucking creepy. People are really fucking crazy. I wonder if it's true, but I honestly don't doubt it. People in this world are fucking psycho.
For reference, I'm a 23-year-old female. The story took place when I was 17 years old and home alone, when my parents took a trip out of the US to Toronto, Ontario. We lived there for 3 years for my father's job when I was a child, so they were visiting old friends that they had made when we lived there. My older brother was out of state in college at the time, so I was alone for the week. It was a Friday night, and one of my good guy friends was supposed to spend the night with me so that I wasn't alone for the weekend. Something came up and he had to return home for the night, leaving me home alone. I wasn't worried or nervous at all because I'd been staying home alone since I was 12 years old. And as I got older, I'd spent several nights alone. My friend ended up leaving at around 10 that night. I texted my mom letting her know that he had to leave and that I'd be alone for the night now. She told me it was fine, but to just be careful and make sure the alarm was on. So I got ready for bed. And
I don't understand that shit. I don't understand that shit. I don't think I could do that. I have kids. They're very young. But I just don't think that I could leave them home alone like that. Just be like, put on the alarm. Be safe. You'll figure it out. Like, no. What are we doing?
To sleep in my parents' bedroom because they had a huge TV in their room with cable access, which I didn't have in my room. I turned the house alarm on, got in bed, and started looking for a movie on cable to watch. My dog was lying on the bed with me, so I knew she couldn't have done anything to cause what happened next.
Maybe they'd be old enough.
About an hour had passed, and I was flipping through the channels when my house alarm suddenly went off. I immediately looked at the alarm unit by the bedroom door and saw the red light was flashing on and off. I froze. It was a very loud and repetitive beeping sound.
Oh, hell no.
I think it took me about 15 seconds just to process what was happening.
This is gonna be
Did the alarm just go off by itself?
Yes, it's an Oreo McFlurry.
There's no way a door opened. Immediately, I started thinking of anyone and everyone I knew that could have possibly opened one of the doors to my house with a key. You know, since all of the doors were locked. I knew my brother wasn't coming home for the weekend. I knew it wasn't my friend who had recently left because I just received a text saying he was home. I went through all of my friends that I could think of, and every single one of them was either out of town or busy. I knew none of my neighbors would have opened any of the doors either. I went through all of this in my head in that 15 seconds that I was frozen on the bed.
That's how I be thinking.
Finally, I snapped out of it and I ran to my parents' bedroom door, closed it, and then locked it.
Overthink mode.
I refrained from turning the alarm off because I knew that it automatically calls the police once it hits 1 minute of going off. And I was also thinking the loud alarm would scare away whoever just broke into my house.
Oh, hell no.
After I locked the door, I went to my mom's night table and took out a revolver that she kept in there, just in case of emergencies like this one. Now, I'm only about 5'4", and I knew that if anyone came through that door had the intention of hurting me, they would have easily succeeded. I wasn't taking any chances. I took out the gun, made sure it was loaded, and took the safety off.
Okay.
I held the gun up and I pointed it at the door, but kept my finger off the trigger, as you're supposed to do until you know for a fact you're going to shoot. I couldn't believe that I was holding a gun and pointing it at something, and possibly someone, with the intention to shoot if they proved to be dangerous.
Watch it be like
I sat there mentally preparing myself to shoot whoever managed to get through the door. This is something I never thought I'd have to do. I remained calm and I didn't let my emotions or fear get the better of me. I knew I needed to stay quiet and keep my head clear in case something actually happened. I was kneeling on the floor in this position for what felt like forever, but I'm sure only about 2 minutes truly passed. The alarm was still going off, and I decided that I would call 911 just in case the alarm system malfunctioned and didn't call the police. I dialed 911, explained to them everything that was going on, and they sent 2 police officers my way. The dispatcher stayed on the phone with me until the cops got there. They checked the exterior perimeter of my house before knocking on the front door. I turned off the alarm and then put the gun away.
So where'd the person go?
I opened the front door and talked to the officers. They told me they found no sign of a break-in on the outside of the house. They asked me a few questions about what happened, and I explained everything to them. They again asked me if I wanted to do a sweep of the interior of the house just to see if anyone had broken in and possibly hid somewhere. Looking back, I cannot believe how stupid my answer was. No, I think it's okay now. The cops assured me they would remain in the area, and they told me not to hesitate to call back if anything else happened. I walked them out, locked the door behind them,
She's dumb,
and went back into my parents' room. I made sure my dog wasn't spooked at anything that happened,
What kind of...
being that she's a twin.
Who does that? I think somebody broke into my house. You want us to do a sweep and make sure? No, I think you scared him.
20-pound Cocker Spaniel, and not exactly the guard dog type. I then proceeded to finally call my parents and then tell them what happened. My mom has always been an extremely calm person, so she didn't panic. And I guess I have to thank her for my calm attitude during all of this, because I'm a lot like her in that sense.
It's the mom's
My
fault.
dad, however, was very clearly worried about me, being that I was his young daughter home alone. They asked me if I was okay and if I wanted them to come home early. I told them that wasn't necessary, and I'm sure nothing like that would happen again since the alarm probably scared them off.
See?
I hung up the phone with my parents, and I realized that I hadn't turned the alarm back on. So I went to the alarm system, entered the code, and pushed set. Nothing happened. It wasn't turning back on. I was confused at first, but then I realized the alarm doesn't turn on unless every door in the house is completely shut. My heart dropped. Shit, I muttered out loud. I had the realization that I had to now go around the house and look for what door had been opened and set the alarm off in the first place.
Oh my god.
This is when I truly realized how stupid I was to tell the police officers no when they asked if I wanted them to search the interior of the house. I went back in my mom's night table and picked up the gun, again, mentally preparing for the worst. I then went to every door on the ground level of my house, holding the gun in both of my hands. I finally made it to the hallway where the door entering our garage was. And it was there that I saw the door to the garage had been left wide open. Chills went through my body at the thought that someone had actually tried to break in, and they succeeded. Now, we had 2 ground level windows in our garage,
That's what garage looks like.
so someone coming through there to get into the house was not far-fetched. I turned the light on in the garage and held the gun in front of me. I looked at the 2 windows in the garage, and there didn't seem to be any sign that they were opened. I immediately shut the door to the garage, locked it, and tried turning the alarm on again. It worked this time. After this, I went through the entirety of the house with the gun in hand to check if anyone had hidden anywhere. I prayed the entire time that I wouldn't find anyone, and that I really wouldn't have to use that gun. And to my relief, I found nothing and no one. I slept with my parents' bedroom door locked that night, and with the revolver under my pillow for the rest of the week. When my parents returned home from the trip, my father inspected the windows in the garage to see if they had been forced open or anything like that. As I figured, there was no evidence of a forced entry. My parents concluded that the door to the garage must have not been shut all the way, and a gust of wind came from outside through the garage. And then swung the door to the house open, causing the alarm to go off.
No, I don't
We
believe
never
that.
figured out what actually happened that night. Since then, I have had one more experience with a possible break-in when I was in college and I came home for the weekend. That story wasn't as scary, but I was alone again, and my parents were doing the same thing during the first time, visiting friends in Canada. I'm now 23 years old. 6 years have passed since that night, and whatever it was, whatever truly happened, well, it continues to be the scariest night of my life. I can't even bring myself to imagine what would have happened if we didn't have that alarm system, and if I didn't have my mom's gun to feel safer. Although nothing bad ended up actually happening, I advise everyone hearing this story to always make sure your home has an alarm, and to always keep a gun in the home to protect yourself.
Bro, that shit. This was just like a suspenseful story. Nothing happened.
Back in the day, I used to work for the National Trust up in Scotland. It was a really lonely job, with a lot of it spent either driving long distances or walking around the highlands in dire weather conditions. At work, I used to drive around this big 4x4, but off-duty, I had to use my own car, which was absolutely crap. So this one Saturday, I planned to drive back down to England for my mom's birthday. Me and my boyfriend had this whole big thing planned for her. I'd
This
drive
is
down in the
already
morning, help
like
get set up, then I'd go and pick Mom up
the
for the big
animation is
surprise.
what does it for me.
I was massively excited about it, and massively confident that my mom would be over the moon with it. What I wasn't confident
My
about
mum.
was the ability of my poor little Nissan Micra to
My
get me there
poor
without
little
giving me
Nissan.
trouble. I was driving through the highlands, absolute arse end of nowhere and all, and the engine started making some really unhealthy noises. I pulled over to the side of the road, but I couldn't work out what was wrong. I thought I'd be able to get it to a garage and risk being a little bit late, but when I got back in my car and tried starting it up again, nothing. The engine was trying to turn over, just never coming to life, and no matter how hard I tried or what little tricks I tried to pull, I just couldn't get the car to start.
That's scary too.
These days,
Being
I'd have just
stranded.
pulled up an app and had a bloke out for repairs or a tow
Like
within
that.
an hour or so. But back then, in the age of flip phones and spotty mobile reception, breaking down in the middle of nowhere could be a huge pain in the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
I tried the engine a few more times while mentally preparing myself to actually get out and walk.
Mm-mm.
This was in the middle of November, by the way,
Oh,
so
wow.
it was absolutely freezing as it was, but then the Highland gales meant the idea of walking anywhere was grim beyond belief. I fought it for as long as I could, but in the end, I fastened up my coat, whacked on my hat and gloves, and got out of my car to face the cold. The plan was to walk to the nearest anything, which hopefully had a phone or someone capable of engine repairs, but then no sooner had I started walking, but a car suddenly appeared in the distance. Each side of the road was lined with trees, and the road kind of snaked off in the distance, so the car's appearance
Dude,
took
this
me
is
by surprise at
scary. I
first.
don't like this either.
I
Like,
actually
this is
said
like
a
real
prayer to
life
myself that
scary.
whoever it
This is
was would
like
pull
not
over for
even
me, and
horror
when
or
they did,
supernatural.
I thought
This is
those
like
prayers had been
real
answered.
life scary.
But at the risk of sounding a bit melodramatic,
No.
I don't think it was God that
No.
answered my prayers that day, rather than his opposite number downstairs.
There's no
Anyways,
fucking way.
the car pulls over and this quite friendly-looking middle-aged man rolls down the window and asks if I'm all right.
No.
I explain the
No, I'm
situation,
not
tell him where my
alright. Go
car
away.
is, and he says that depending on how bad the damage is,
Look at
he
how
might be
they're
able to get
leaning
his
in.
mate to
They're
come
like,
and fix it on the cheap.
I'll kiss you for a
I just
ride.
about danced a little jig that I was so happy.
Dance
Then he
a
invites
little
me into his
jig.
car
I'm
and
done.
gives me a lift back to mine.
I
We
get
made a bit of
ride.
small talk after I noticed his English
I'm done.
accent, and we both swapped stories explaining why we were both up in Scotland. After we pulled up behind my car, he pulled out his mobile and started texting someone, apparently the person who was going to come fix my car.
Oh, hell no.
When I asked him, he explained that up in the Highlands, it was much better to send texts with that little signal you could muster. It was a little slower in terms of response time and all, but the message actually went through loud and clear instead of garbled and spotty.
This is already sus.
He told me not to
No.
worry, though, as his
No.
mechanic friend worked Saturdays and was probably close to a phone. Those of you in your 20s might not remember the ritual of holding your plastic brick of a phone high above your head to try and force a text
I was
message
doing
through.
that today.
But after a minute or so of that, my Highland Samaritan assured me that the text had both been received and read.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was
Yeah,
looking hunky-dory. All I had to do was...
Did they even have that feature on flip phones back then? Talking about it was received and read. Like what? Did they even have that option on flip phones and the old like cell phones and shit?
be patient and hope for the
I don't
best.
think that they did.
Within a few minutes, the kind stranger's phone had buzzed,
Sus.
and he reported that his mate was on the way, although he
His
wouldn't be
mate.
arriving for another 20 minutes or so. 20 minutes I could deal with, and if the guy could get me to my mom's surprise party on time, the one I'd spent a month planning, I was willing to give him everything I had in my wallet. But then, as I sat waiting with the bloke, still making the same
bloke.
small talk, I noticed that he changed some minor detail in his story. I won't bore you with the ins and out of it, but he basically
minor
told me his
detail?
business was in one place, and then about 10 to 15 minutes later, he told me it was based somewhere else. I didn't jump on the sudden change of detail or anything. I mean, a business can have more than one branch, can it? And people misspeak all the
That's
time,
sus
so
though,
I'm not
bitch. That's
exactly going to
sus.
act all
That is a
Sherlock
red
Holmes on a bloke
flag.
who's supposedly doing me a favor, am I?
Please pay
That was the first
attention.
red flag, you might say.
Yes.
One I didn't really acknowledge until after
Yeah.
the event itself.
Okay.
It was only the
There.
second
At
that
least you're
actually caught my
acknowledging it.
attention. After a brief lull in the conversation, the man asked if anyone was expecting me. He used that exact same phrase, too. Expecting you. And I'm
See. Hell no. Hell no. Right then and there, right then and there, I would have like really started to have a panic attack. Like, what the fuck do you mean? Why are you asking if anyone's expecting me? Like, what? That's that would have like if that happened to me, I would have been scared in that moment. Like, what the fuck do you mean? Is anybody expect? Yes, there are multiple people expecting me. So and so has a tracking device on my phone in my car in my shoe and shit. So
I must have given him a funny look or something because he clarified with, have you got any plans later?
yeah,
I started telling him about my
that's
mom's
dude, that's totally different.
party,
That's
how I'd
totally
been planning
different.
it for ages, how my whole family expected me to be there. And instead of showing any interest or enthusiasm whatsoever, he sort of nodded and started staring off into the distance like he was thinking about something.
That's fucking
That wasn't what got me, though.
no.
It was how he'd phrased the question. Was anyone expecting me?
Yes,
And then
exactly,
considering
bitch.
he was apparently just bringing his mate to fix my car, and I hadn't heard what they'd said to each other. It
Exactly.
all added up to a really bad feeling in the pit of my
Bad,
stomach.
bad feeling.
Call it a woman's
In the
intuition, but
middle of
I knew I
nowhere.
had to do something,
Fuck that
anything to
shit.
try to get ahead of what I feared the most.
Hmm.
I asked the guy how long his mechanic friend is going to be, and after his long and contemplative state, he snapped right back into his friendly.
How is she gonna get away and her car is broken down though if something does go down?
He checked his phone and
Like
then
this is the
told me,
question
"Eh,
now.
it seems like it's only
This
going to
is
be a
why
few more
you do not
minutes."
hitchhike. This is why
So
you
I put my little plan into
you don't put
action.
yourself
I
in
told the
these
bloke that I had to grab a few
situations.
things from my car just in case it needed a tow or I had to go
Mm-mm.
anywhere, then slipped out of his car and walked towards my own.
Gotta be
Once I was
careful.
there, I put on a show of looking for things, and when what I was doing in actual fact was
What was you
delaying
doing?
time until his mechanic friend arrived. If it was some bloke in
To
overalls driving his work van, then yeah, I probably had nothing to worry about. But anything else, I'd put phase 2 of my plan into action. I kept at it for a few minutes, fishing around for absolutely nothing while keeping my eyes glued to the road behind us.
that's fucking
Then lo and
scary,
behold,
dude.
a big white van comes from around the bend a few hundred yards behind
And
us
it's a
and
van.
starts pulling in behind the stranger's car. The
And
van was
it's
all
a
white, no
van.
marking on
I
it at all, and
can't.
it looked
I'm
brand new.
not.
On top of that,
I'm
there were two people
done.
sitting in the cab,
Two
not just one
people.
as I'd been expecting. Like I said, if everyone's intentions were good, then me
This
acting
is
a bit
real life
paranoid wasn't going to
scary.
do anyone any harm. The
Real
mechanic
life.
and his friend might think that I was a bit weird, but weird I can live with. What I couldn't live with was the feeling I was walking into some kind of trap. The moment the van started to pull in behind the stranger's car, I hurried back to him and told him something like, I'm just gonna nip for a wee. I'll be back in a few.
Nip for a.
At that, I scurried up, nip for a wee. I'll be back in a few. To him and told him something like, I'm just gonna nip for a wee. I'll be back in a few.
I'm
At
just
that,
gonna
I
nip for
scurried
a
off into the
wee.
trees at the side of the road and kept myself crouched and out of
And
sight as
you.
if I was actually having a wee. But in
Okay.
actual fact, I'm just watching the seemingly kind stranger and his friends to make sure that they didn't have anything planned. I stayed where I was, telling myself I wouldn't move until I got a good look at the two blokes who'd.
You know what? This is kind of smart, though. This is kind of smart, though. She said, I'm about to nip for a wee. And she went and acted like she was crouching to go pee, to hide behind whatever bush or tree she could find to look at these motherfuckers from afar because they like it's now three against one. Her car is fucked up. They got two vehicles, and one of them's a mechanic or whatever the case. I don't, you know what I mean? So it's like, how is this gonna? How? What are we gonna? What's gonna happen? but I feel like this move. I don't know, I may be stupid too. I don't know, but like I feel like this move was very smart because it gives her distance. If she barricaded herself in her car, that does not work. They could have just busted out the windows and got her out. There's three of them. So it's like, worst case scenario, I mean, at least you got some distance between you and them and you can try to run. I don't fucking know. Like, what do you do in this situation? These are some impossible situations, you guys.
Just pulled up in the van. But the minutes ticked by and no one moved. Eventually, I heard the stranger's voice calling me from the side of the road.
Oh, hell no.
He sounded friendly at first, and just let me know that the
first.
blokes were working on my car. Only thing was, I could see a bit of my car, and there was no one standing near it. I still felt like I was going half mad at this point, that I'd gotten myself...
No, hell no, fuck that, hell no. You see this motherfucker, you see him calling you and saying, oh, my friend's working on your car, ha ha ha, whatever. And then you see your car and no one's working on it. Like, no, there's
into a tizzy and completely overreacted. Then, right as I told myself that I was gonna feel very silly after this if the guys really were there just to fix my car, the stranger's tone of voice changed dramatically. That alone sent a chill through me, but what truly terrified me was when he used my name. At no point in our conversation had we ever swapped names or introduced ourselves formally.
Oh, hell to
I know
the
that sounds a bit mental, since I was sitting with the bloke for the better part of a half hour, but my mind was on other things. And evidently, his was too, because he never bothered to introduce himself either. I know there's always a chance that I let it slip during our chat and just not remembered it, but
that's what I was just
certainly
thinking
didn't know his name, which made it all the more frightening when he told me to show myself.
Show yourself!
He made it clear that if I didn't, it wouldn't be good for me, and that I might actually get to my mom's party on time if I just did as he told me.
Oh no.
Squatting down among the clump of trees, trying to stay out of sight of those not-so-benevolent strangers, they made for the scariest few moments of my entire life.
How does this end?
I didn't think it was possible to get any more frightened than that.
Here I am.
But I was wrong. Suddenly, I heard an engine start up, but I knew from how healthy it sounded that it wasn't mine. The next thing, I see the stranger's car drive off, and that's the first stranger who picked me up, not the two strangers in the van. I thought that might mean that the van was about to drive off too, so I poked my head out from behind the trees a wee bit to get a better look. That's when I see a man, wearing a balaclava, walking through the trees with his head on a swivel like he...
First of all, if we're talking about a balaclava, is that the fuck that they just said?
Wearing a balaclava.
A balaclava? That's not. Is that a balaclava? Because am I thinking of like the fur hats with the flaps and shit? Isn't that what that is? Because that looks like a ski mask or some shit. I don't know. A balaclava. Either way,
walking through the trees.
If that's what that looks like, then that's fucked up. It's scary.
With his head on a swivel like
But
he's searching for me.
if it's a balaclava, it's just like a winter hat. And she said it was in November. And we're in Scotland and stuff. So, I mean, like, the fur hat would make sense.
Remember what I said about being wrong regarding how scared I could be?
A balaclava.
I can actually remember most of the stuff that happened, but after seeing that guy in his mask, quite obviously searching for yours truly, my memory actually gets a bit spotty. I know I just ran, further and faster and harder than I ever ran in my life. I remember being sick a bit when I couldn't run any further, and I remember many cars passing me before a driver finally bothered to stop to see if I was actually okay.
Yeah, I guess that is like the technical term for that type of mask. Yep, it's a balaclava. I'm like, it's a ski mask. Yeah.
I also remember being frightened out of my wits that the first stranger or the guys in the van would come across me, but thankfully that didn't happen.
This shit is retarded.
Instead, I was driven to a police station where I gave a statement. After that came a trip to a mechanic's, which resulted in me finding out my car wouldn't be roadworthy for at least 24 hours. After that, I got a room and a bed and breakfast, got myself a late lunch, then cried on the phone to my mom up in my room. I actually think it was the single worst day of my life. I let my mom down, had to dip into my savings to pay for engine repairs, and it was just a complete nightmare of a day. And to top it all off, I almost got kidnapped or murdered as well. I just didn't think things like that happened in real life, or if they did, I certainly didn't think it had ever happened to me.
She did a smart
I was
thing.
able to give a really detailed description of the first guy along with what car he was driving, but
I almost
as for the
got
other
kidnapped.
2 men, I didn't have much
I
to
feel
say
like she did a
aside
smart
from what their
thing.
van looked
Going
like.
and hiding. If there was enough
The
like
police
brush and
promised
bush
that
on
they'd
the
do
side
all
of the
they
road
could,
and
and they
trees
even
and
got
it's
the
like the
first guy in
woods
for
and shit.
questioning. But
Oh
given
yeah.
that he hadn't actually
I would have
broken
probably
any
done the same
laws,
thing. That's
they
like
were
really
unable to
smart.
charge him with anything.
My car's fucked
The
up.
police
They're
had asked him
here.
about the masked men in the white van, but he just claimed he didn't know what they were talking
Yeah.
about.
I think they said like in
According to
England,
him, he
Scotland,
tried to do a favor to a
Ireland,
young
somewhere
woman
in
whose
that
car had
area.
broken down, and the next thing, she's off into the woods in a blind panic. They let him go, but I know he was involved in it, and I know he only let me see his face because he thought I was a done deal. But if that's the case, how many other women and girls have his tactics worked on? And that's the thought I find myself living with after all these years. I can be thankful and grateful and whatever else I can be that I didn't end up a victim that day, but I can't be the only one. There have to be more. Girls who didn't get away. And it haunts me to wonder where they are now.
That was like real life
I am a
scary.
proud Floridian. At the time of this story, early 2000s, I was going to college in South Florida, and I lived with my family in my hometown located in the Panhandle. It's about a 7-hour drive up through Central Florida to get between my school and my house, so I mostly went home just for the holidays. It was the Thanksgiving of my junior year, and I was excited that I had been able to rearrange my midterms to be able to leave campus 3 days ahead of everyone else. I was expecting to beat the masses of traffic, and I was hoping for a quick trip back home. My roommates wanted to have one last meal together before we all left for break. So we all met up at the campus dining hall
They're all
around
just
4
like riding
p.m.,
down the road,
and I set off on my journey around
minding their own
5:30.
business, and then bam,
Around 10
something
p.m.,
happens.
I was just a bit more than halfway there. I always stopped at this mom and pop kind of diner by the side of the highway to grab some food, use the restroom, and called my dad to let him know that I was okay. I didn't have a cell phone back then. Well, I hadn't been through here since summer, and unfortunately the place went out of business. So, a bit bummed out that I wasn't going to be able to get my
Man, that
chocolate chip
happened
pancakes,
to me too.
I just kept going.
You're heading home, you're on your way to go and like relax with your family, and you're like, oh, I really missed this one place that used to make this one thing that I really love to eat when it's like my favorite comfort food, and then you go there and it's closed, especially because of COVID. So many places are just like, sadly, have closed. My absolute 100% favorite restaurant in the whole entire world closed because of COVID. So I feel your
There
pain,
really wasn't
guy.
much build up around there at the time. So when I saw signs for a rest stop in, of all places on God's green earth, some bumfuck town called Alachua, I went and parked directly under the streetlight for safety
Alachua,
and used the
Florida.
facilities, called my dad
Somebody
on the
look it up,
payphone,
because it
etc.
sticks.
I didn't see anyone else there, except for a very exhausted looking woman, who asked me for directions, saying that she was with her husband and 2 small children, and they had made a wrong turn trying to get to Disney. Alachua is about 150 miles from Disney World. So I left the rest area and was walking back to my car when I noticed a beat-up, unmarked bluish-gray work van parked very close to the driver's side door of my '95 Honda Civic. I thought, yeah, okay, that's pretty weird. Of course, it had Florida tags on it. So it couldn't have been the lady I talked to before. I distinctly remember she said she was from Virginia. I turned around and hightailed it back to the rest stop, promptly running into some random middle-aged guy who had 2 little boys with him. It turns out that it was his wife that I had spoken to before. She emerged from the bathroom a second later. I told him what was going on with the van, and how I didn't know what to do. He said that he would go and check it out. So he left the kids with his wife, then walked up to the driver's side door of the van. He stood there for a moment before speaking. His voice awkwardly quivered, but I could hear him yelling from where we were standing, about 100 feet away.
Excuse me, gentlemen. We've already called the police, so I'm going to have to politely suggest that you get out of here.
He then ran back to us, grabbed his wife and kids, and...
He did not say he ran back. Can you imagine?
We already called the police. You better get out of here.
Just like booked it out of
pointed
there
to
like
me with
I'm
a Swift.
dead.
You, come on, let's get in the car.
Come on.
Now.
And we all ran back to his car together. Very confused, sitting in the back seat of a stranger's SUV, while he went and
They're
used the
just sitting
payphone,
there.
presumably to call the police. Meanwhile, the van pulled out of there. I had never seen someone get out of there quite like they got out of there. They ran up onto the curb on their way out. They burned rubber.
I'm dead.
It was almost comical.
I'm fucking dead.
The cops got there and I found out what happened. The man went to go check out the van, and he could see inside pretty well, because I had parked under the streetlight. The first thing he noticed was that all the seats except for the driver's seat had been removed. There was someone sitting in the driver's seat, and another guy hiding in the back, with a tarp laid out, and a bunch of other random items back there that I couldn't immediately identify. Neither of the men were reading a
He said,
newspaper
I
or
never
a map.
seen anybody get the
They
out of
were
there like
both
that van got
apparently
the
just
out of there.
sitting there, waiting. Still makes me sick just thinking about it. This happened when I was 14. I was home alone one weekend while my parents were at a work convention out of state. I was in my bedroom playing Rocket League with two of my friends. To clarify, they weren't in the room with me. I was talking to them on my headset.
Playing online.
During the game, I heard a thump from downstairs.
Dude, that's scary too. Being by
This wasn't
yourself.
unusual because I have two cats who wrestle each other sometimes, and they often make a lot of noise while they're doing it. So I assumed that's what it was and resumed my game. But I slightly turned down the volume to hear if the noise persisted. 2 minutes later, I hear another thump,
Oh hell
followed
no.
by what sounded like a grunt.
Oh hell no.
Hang on, guys. I think I hear something downstairs.
Hell no.
Go
That
check
would
it out.
be fucking
We'll be here when you get back.
scary.
I began
would
to
be
make my
fucking
way
scary.
downstairs, thinking that my cats were wrestling rougher than they usually do. But as I got about halfway, I froze. I could hear what sounded like men whispering to each other, coming from the living room. I crouched down to get a small peek into the living room and saw 3 men, dressed in black. I felt my chest sink in when I saw them. I slowly went back upstairs, and of course, like in a typical horror film, the very last step made a loud creak.
Oh hell no.
The entire house went silent. I knew that they heard it. Thinking on my feet, I quietly went to my room and threw on my headset. Guys, I need you to call 911. There are 3 men inside my house. What? Look, I don't have time to explain. Just call the cops and send them to my house right now. I'm being 100% serious. I then threw my headset on the bed. I could hear footsteps coming up the stairs.
Oh hell no, dude. Hell
I had to think fast. I knew that if I locked
better
myself
hide.
inside my room, they would know where I was. So I closed the door and snuck over to
would
my parents'
hide.
room,
I would just
leaving the door open so they wouldn't think to check it. I know the logic is flawed, but I had to think
I swear
fast.
to God.
5 seconds later, I heard a pair of heavy boots hit the wooden floor,
They're walking in
accompanied
sync,
by
y'all.
2 more sets.
Said, "I'm gonna
I then
get
heard
you."
them get louder as they came down the hall and stopped outside my bedroom. I heard pounding on my bedroom door.
Right.
followed
If
by
I
a
can't
deep
see
voice
them, they
saying,
can't see me. I'm
Open up, kid,
hiding.
before I take this door down.
Oh,
I lost my nerve and made a rash decision.
A rash
I
decision.
made a break for my parents' bedroom window and slid it open.
That's
I
too
must have made a
much.
lot of noise while I was doing it,
That's too
because
much.
I heard the footsteps coming towards my parents' bedroom now. I looked over my shoulder and saw a dark figure appear in the doorway.
Get back here!
Oh my god.
The man
no.
yelled as he ran towards me.
Oh my god.
At this point, I tried jumping out of the window, but the man grabbed one of my ankles.
God.
Luckily, I was able to move my feet and slip out of my shoe, and I fell onto the small roof above my back porch. The man at the
They're
window
like, we're
jumped
not
after
animating
me.
all that though.
I remember seeing a pair of boots coming right at me. I
I'm like,
swear
what
the
is
man's
going
feet would have
on?
gone right through me if I hadn't rolled off the roof at the last second. I
Rolled
landed
off
awkwardly
the
on my
roof.
left ankle, but otherwise, I was okay. During all the commotion, one of the men ran downstairs to cut me off. Limping on one foot, I made it to the backyard gate before the man grabbed me and threw me to the ground. I tried to yell, but the man covered my mouth with his hand as the two other men climbed down from the window. The three of them began pulling me back into the house. But before they could get me through the door, I heard the sound of police sirens closing in. The men all looked at each other.
Shit!
They dropped me and ran towards the back gate. I limped my way to the front door and yanked it open and yelled at the police officers. Hey, they're in the backyard. Three of the officers ran towards the backyard, while another helped me to one of the police cars. They managed to catch one of the assailants, while the other two made it over the fence. They threw the man into one of the cruisers as I was giving my statement.
This is so cute.
Soon, the two friends I was playing online with pulled into the driveway on their
These are not the type of scary stories that I thought it was gonna be.
bikes. Hey Gabe, are you okay? Yeah, I'm alright. Thanks for calling the cops for me. The man that was caught was charged with burglary and attempted kidnapping. It turns out that the men broke through the basement window.
Isn't like kidnapping defined as like, I think it's like confining the person or something like that?
I'm thankful that I managed to escape with only a sprained ankle. My lesson to everyone listening is to always follow your gut and never ignore any sounds you hear while you're home alone.
Well then. I think that's where I'm gonna end it for tonight. That's gonna be what we're gonna do, because that was fun. But I'm getting sleepy. It's like my screen is like a little too bright for me, I feel. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna turn it down, and yeah, it didn't work out. So, I guess this is goodbye. Yes, it was fun. Good night, everybody. Everybody have a good time. Happy. We're gonna have to find some different stories, cause yeah. Bye, you guys.